Welcome to the Brewing Wellness podcast, nourishing UFT members, one conversation at a time. Brewing Wellness is a podcast created by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. In order to do the work you do every day and be present for your loved ones, students, and patients, your cup has to be full. Brewing Wellness focuses on mental health and wellness topics that can help us all thrive in our professional and personal lives. We'll be releasing a new episode on the last Monday of each month. Remember to listen to the Brewing Wellness podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And please, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Brewing Wellness podcast hosted by the UFT Member Assistance Program. My name is Stuart Kaplan, and I am the UFT Health and Safety Representative in Staten Island and the chair of the UFT Runners Committee. Today, I'm joined by Shanna Honkomp, a recent social work graduate from Fordham University and a certified yoga instructor. We're almost there. Summer is coming, and to kick off summer, we want to use today's episode to discuss the importance of physical activity and mental health. As the weather gets warmer and everyone gets ready to head outside, we want to emphasize the benefits of remaining physically active and finding what works for you. And when you're finding what works for you, the best part is sometimes it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, then the next day you can always get up and try something else. But it's great to try to challenge yourself and find the activity that you like to do most. So Shanna, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Stuart. I'm so thrilled to be here. I am doing great. I actually just came back from a yoga retreat that was a silent meditation and yoga retreat upstate, so I'm feeling like extra inspired to talk to you about the benefits of yoga.
So tell me, that's a great thing to talk about. What is a yoga retreat like?
Well, this one specifically was silent, so it was 48 hours of silence, but then we were being led by a teacher in meditation practices, in chanting, in yoga, like physical asana practices. And honestly, it was really relieving. It was interesting. A lot of my friends, when I told them I was leaving and told them I would be turning my phone off for 48 hours, they were like, good luck, you know? And it just felt relieving to not have to sort of be anyone specific for 48 hours. Like I didn't have to be a teacher. I didn't have to be a student. I didn't have to be a daughter. I didn't have to be any of those things. I just got to kind of relax and be. It's lovely.
So before going into this yoga retreat, knowing that it's going to be silent, did you have any fears going in or were there any challenges that you were afraid of?
I really wasn't afraid of anything. I've done this once before, so I sort of already knew what to expect. And I also, the yoga community that I've been in for a really long time, it was that community that I went with. So I felt really safe with the teacher, really safe with all of my fellow students. And I wasn't really nervous. I was more curious than anything else.
So for someone like me who can't keep their mouth shut and talks all the time, this might be a great thing for me to do, going to a yoga retreat, just to have 48 hours of complete silence.
It would be a challenge. I would suggest it.
I think it's something that I would like to try.
Yeah.
I think there would be bets. There would be bets out there of how long I would last. But I think it definitely is something that I would like to try. So as we mentioned earlier, you are a certified yoga instructor.
Correct.
Okay. What type of yoga do you teach?
So it's called Jivamukti Yoga. It's based on, we describe it as vinyasa. So a lot of people are familiar with vinyasa, where there's a movement attached to breath and a breath attached with movement. Jivamukti goes a little bit further, where we teach there's 8 limbs of yoga. So the physical asana part is one limb, but then there are all these other limbs like breath practices and meditation and chanting and philosophy and all sorts of other parts of limbs of yoga. So Jivamukti teaches all of those parts within one class.
So it's interesting that you talk about the breath work because I did yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I did a vinyasa class yesterday, and my instructor kept telling me when I was breathing to close my mouth when I was breathing, and I realized the importance of keeping my mouth closed when I was breathing. it felt much calmer being able to breathe with my mouth closed than with my mouth opened, which is interesting because as a runner, we don't run with our mouths closed. We breathe with our mouth open. So it's interesting.
Yeah, there's like a specific reason probably for both,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a specific reason, like we talk about the energetic aspect of it and that it keeps kind of your energy inward with the breath just going through the nose. And I'm sure with running, it helps kind of like expel the air and kind of get bigger breaths when you use your mouth.
Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and your journey becoming a yoga instructor?
Yeah, so I've always had kind of a physical practice. I grew up dancing and I actually got my undergraduate degree in dance. And so I danced for 20 years. I danced professionally a little bit. And then when I stopped dancing, I really was missing a physical practice of some sort. And I was starting to feel kind of like I was losing my passion and my vigor for life. And one of my friends took me to a yoga class and I was immediately hooked. And I have stayed for 17 years and I've been practicing regularly for 17 years. And then 4 years after I started practicing, I got my initial yoga certificate, which was 300-hour yoga certificate. And then I did a 1.5 year apprenticeship that was another 500 hours. And so I've been teaching for 14 years now.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I'm sure while you're teaching it, you're also reaping the benefits of continuing to do yoga as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think like it's a practice, much like I'm sure running, where I'm constantly practicing and my teaching comes from a place of practicing, and I would feel weird if I were not practicing yoga but only teaching it. So, yeah. And what about you? So you, I know that you're part of the Runners Committee with the UFT, and how did you come to your journey of running? How long have you been running?
So I have always enjoyed fitness, but I started running when I was a teenager, and then I kind of fell off of running and started pursuing other activities. For most of my 20s and early 30s, I would go to the gym and I would lift weights and I would do cardio there, but I didn't feel as if I was getting the benefits towards the end of that as I did when I had first started. And there was one day that I decided that I wanted to just go for a run, and I went for a run and I felt great. And I said, I want to continue to feel this way. So I continued to run. And as I continued to run, I started going to the gym less and less. And then I started signing up to run races. And what's interesting about the running races is now that got into my competitiveness. And I started to really enjoy running races. And then I stopped going to the gym. And then running became my thing. I think I got involved in the Runners Committee through Pat Filomena. So Pat Filomena was the district rep for District 7 for many, many years. And she saw me at the UFT 5K and said, I want you to be a part of the UFT Runners Committee. So it was something that I was trying to bring back, but it took a couple of years for us to be able to get the Runners Committee up and started. But one of the things that I have found over the last couple of years, connecting to that competitiveness with my running, I started getting so competitive with my running that I started to lose out on the joy of running. It wasn't so much about being able to go out and feel good when I run, but it was about going out to train for a race or a marathon. And there were moments where I was beating myself up because I wasn't making the time that I had expected to make, or I expected myself to make, or I was running a race and I wasn't seeing the results that I expected to have when I finished the race. And that started to kind of turn me off of running, where I felt like running was becoming more of a job than just a joy and an activity. So I guess it was earlier this year, we had been toying with the idea of bringing the Runners Committee back. Bringing the Runners Committee back was a way for me to be able to step away from the competitive aspect of running and try to get back into running. So we would meet as a committee virtually, and just talk about those everyday challenges that we might see with running, or talk about nutrition and running, or talk about stretching and strength training with running. And so all of a sudden, I wasn't really thinking about racing anymore or making those, those set goals anymore. But my set goal was enjoying the run and enjoying what I was doing. So I think it's interesting that the UFT Runners Committee actually helped bring me back into feeling that joy of running that I lost a few years ago, which is nice.
Yeah. That sounds like it's a little bit more fulfilling when you kind of create this community rather than just doing it for like a number.
Yeah. So we actually we had an event a few weeks ago. Years ago, the UFT Runners Committee ran the JP Morgan Corporate Challenge. And there was one moment, I think there was one time in the 90s or a couple of times in the 90s, I remember hearing that we actually won the JP Morgan Corporate Challenge. So we decided to come back and do it this year. And one of the nicest things about doing it wasn't just running the 3.5 miles in Central Park, but it was us actually hanging out in Central Park prior to the race or waiting online, for the race to begin. That to me was more joy than the actual running, because we were hanging out, we were talking about running, we were excited. There felt like that there was that community camaraderie that I think I lost a few years ago, which is nice that we're bringing that back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as a recent social work graduate and yoga instructor, I'm sure you know the connection between physical activity and mental wellness all too well. What are some of the ways you've seen the connection, either with yourself or with those who you teach?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things is what you were just saying is like the community that is created. I just think about this community of people. Of course, people come, people go, but like there's this core group of people that I've been with for the last 17 years, and we've all seen one another through like the high times and the low times. And I think that is so important for mental health to have a community that you can really lean on. And then the practices of yoga themselves, they're mindfulness practices and they're practices of like coming into the present moment. And that's given me the gift of being able to soak in and enjoy all of the beautiful and joyous moments, because you can be right there for them. You could be super present. And then the physical and mental strength and resilience and flexibility that I've built through the practices of yoga have helped me get through like the harder times in life, where things are more difficult. And so I feel like I have a little bit more strength and resilience to get through those times in life. And I think, it like mindfulness practices and being present we're starting to talk about that more and more kind of in Western culture, and just not living in an experience that had already passed, kind of not dwelling on something that happened in the past and not worrying or fretting about what's about to happen in the future. Like that's, we're doing conscious breathing in the yoga practice. So we're just learning to come back to the breath over and over and over. And so then that allows you to eventually kind of like, get that into your other parts of life, where it's like you're bringing this like presence into your life outside of a yoga studio or off of the mat. And I think like probably, it's something yoga is similar to running, where it's something that you do pretty consistently and you reap the benefits of it the more kind of consistent you are with the practice. And some days you come to it and it's terrible and it's not a great experience and you're comparing yourself to your practice yesterday or a year before. And then some days it's like really spacious and easy and a little bit more light. And you just take it as it is. And I think, I don't know, is that similar to running?
It is. And I think it does take a discipline, because I think, especially as humans and as teachers, we can be very hard on ourselves. We set high standards for ourselves, and when it doesn't go the way we planned it to go, we beat ourselves up and we say, I should have done it differently. I think that there are times where we can focus more on the negative than the positive. Same thing like, with running, it's a practice as well. So you can go out and do a speed interval, an 800-meter speed interval, and you didn't do it in the time that you expected to do it. And there are times where I will, beat myself up and say, I should have done it in this amount of time. And then I have to kind of remind myself, and it's something I have to force myself to do and say, let's think about this for a second. It was a windy day. Wind is going to change your speed. And, let's look at the fact, or let's look, it's humid out. So things might be different, or I'm not feeling as good as I might have a week ago. Why am I comparing my running to what I did last Tuesday, but not comparing my running to what I did 5 minutes before I did that interval? And I think we have to sometimes remind ourselves not to be so hard on ourselves and to be appreciative for what we did do. And there are times that I'll say that, and I'll remind myself to thank myself for the fact and appreciate myself for what I did. And that's one of the things that I like about yoga is that there's a moment where they tell you, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but we'll do the tree pose, right? And in Vinyasa Bikram, that's a very difficult pose to do. And then after you do it, you go into, and if I'm saying this incorrectly, please correct me, Sabasa, when you lay back down.
Shavasana.
Shavasana. You get into Shavasana. And one of the things that my instructor says is, thank yourself, appreciate yourself for what you did. And it's that moment of reminding yourself that you took your body to a place that some people may not be able to do, but you did this, or you tried to get to that point. And thank yourself for what you did and appreciate yourself for what you did. And I think we need to do more of that appreciation for the positive things that we're doing, not what we could have done better.
And it's like a meeting yourself where you are in the moment, right? It's like you're just trying to see where you are that day, see what happens that day, see what comes up that day. I always say, like, we put ourselves in weird poses on a yoga mat, and then we see if we can breathe there. And then when you're put into difficult situations outside of the room, you see if you can breathe there.
One instructor always says, you're going to do 100%. But sometimes 50% is your 100%. And like, those are things that I remember because I take that with me when I'm running now, where I say, listen, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have the best run that I can have. And maybe it's not going to be the same run that I had on Thursday, but it's going to be the best run that I can do today. And I'm going to congratulate myself when I finish and say, good job, Stu, you did a great job, because it's easy for us to criticize ourselves. But, in order to actually, applaud yourself, that's what takes the discipline. That's what takes the practice, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I know, like, a lot of people have a hard time engaging in physical activity because they don't quite know what they like. They don't quite know whether they're a runner, or they like going to the gym, or they like taking a yoga class, or, aerobics or a HIIT workout. Or before getting into running, were there any forms of activity that you knew were just, I know you talked a little bit about going to the gym. Were there any other forms of activity that weren't really working for you, or how did you know that running was it?
So even though I wasn't a consistent runner, I had been running since I was a kid. I used to go running with my dad on the boardwalk. So I always had that joy of running, and it was something that made me feel good when I did it. And, maybe the fact that it was something that my father did is also a reason why I really enjoyed doing it, because it's that thing that we have in common. I've always tried to challenge myself. I will be the person that will say, I don't think I could do this. And then I'll try it and see if I like it. One of the things that I probably did not give myself enough of a chance to like was roller skating and rollerblading. And that's really because I felt like I had no control. I remember going up a ramp, skating up a ramp, and then skating right back down that ramp. And I said, you know what? I don't have the control to be able to enjoy this. And I kind of wish in a way that I gave myself a little bit more of a chance, because I might have liked it. I like to challenge myself. And the next day, if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it, But I always say try it twice. Try it twice, because the first time you're not going to like it. The first time it's going to be challenging. You're not going to like it. But the second time you do it, you're going to love it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't love it, then don't do it the third time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a good
Yeah.
rule for life.
Yeah.
Give it a couple.
Yeah.
Give it a couple tries.
I say the same thing about food.
Mm-hmm.
I say the same thing about food. Try it twice, because the first time you're not going to like it.
Mm-hmm.
Second time you might. So I think we just have to give ourselves that chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone listening to this who wants to get involved with yoga?
Well, I think kind of what you're speaking on is have an open mind. I think there are so many different types of yoga. So there are different types of yoga classes that you might find of the physical yoga. Some of them might be more restorative and restful. Some of them might be more vigorous. There's even, types of yoga that incorporate weights. There's so many types of yoga. So I would say have an open mind. And if the first one you tried wasn't it, you could always try a different one. There's also different practices of yoga, like I was talking about earlier. Breath work, meditation, chanting, there's all these other aspects of yoga. So I'm the type of person that's really like, yoga is for everyone. You just have to find your niche. And then my other piece of advice that I always like to give is if you're going to a studio, it's just like purely practical. Find a place that's close by either your work or your home. Some place where you're actually going to go, where it will be easy, where the commute isn't going to, get in the way of you going and like doing your practice. Yeah, and I think that's just it. Have an open mind and keep trying. Keep trying to figure out what might work for you. Yeah. So we talked a lot about the Runners Committee, we talked about the Runners Committee and your journey with it. But for anyone else who wants to join, how would they go about doing that?
So if anyone's interested in joining the UFT Runners Committee, they can just go right to the UFT website. They can either go to the section on the UFT website where it says committees, and it comes right up. And then there's a button where they can just press join, and they can sign right up to be a part of the UFT Runners Committee. And next year we are going to be having more meetings. We will be doing virtual meetings, but we'll also be doing some meetups as well, and seeing where that takes us. The nice thing about the UFT Runners Committee is that we talk about all different topics that are associated with running. So this year we did a meeting where we talked about nutrition and running. We did one where our topic was about strength training and stretching and the importance of that. We've done meetings with the Runners Committee about mental health and wellness. So, that's the nice thing about, running and physical activity, that there really is a connection between the physical activity and mental wellness and just feeling better. That's one of the pieces of advice that I would give anyone who's going out for a run. If you're going out for a run, don't worry so much about how far you're going to go. Worry about where you're going. Think about where you're going and set those goals. So when I started running, I could only run 3 miles. And this is as an adult. I could only run 3 miles consistently. And one of the ways that I was able to run farther was by setting smaller goals of myself. So I would say, I'm going to try to run a half a mile more than what I could run yesterday. And then once I was able to do that, I said, okay, I'm going to try to run a mile more. And I think it's overcoming the mental barrier that helps you overcome some of those challenges. And I'm
also like taking small bites is like what I'm hearing you say. Like not deciding that you're going to have a 7-day-a-week running practice or yoga practice, but like starting with maybe 1 day a week and then maybe moving up to 2 days a week. I think that's a very like practical piece of advice as well.
Right. And if you want to sign up for a marathon, you've never run before and you want to sign up for a marathon, do it. Sign up for the marathon. But allow yourself that opportunity to practice running and set those small goals for yourself. Sign up with a training plan where you'll be able to, where you have a certain amount of miles that you're running each day, just so you can get up to that mile. When I started training for a marathon, I didn't run 20 miles my first week training. I actually had to build up to it. So we would do long runs, and the long runs would be 12 miles, and then the next week it would be 13 miles. And so we had small steps that we were taking to get to that point so we could physically handle it, but also mentally handle it too. Because if you're not properly trained that way, mentally you clunk out. I'm sure it's the same thing with yoga as well.
Yeah, I think you just have to have a, I always say if students leave my class feeling better than when they walked through the door, then I've done my job. And so I feel like if that's with the mindset you're going in with an open mind, you're feeling like I'm going to explore this, I'm going to explore myself, I'm going to see what comes up. And then if something doesn't work the way, there's always another day to start. You can always start again. So.
And the nice thing about this conversation that we're having, and we talked about this before, is there are so many runners that do yoga because there's a benefit of doing yoga for runners. I know for me, I've gotten into it because I was having some issues with my back. And by doing the stretching from yoga, I have felt much better. And I'm sure you've seen many runners at your yoga studio.
We just started a runners club at the studio where I teach. It's called Souk in the city. We just started a runners club on Sunday mornings for yogis. So yeah, we like the reciprocity of the two things. They go hand in hand pretty well. So it's like the stretching and the kind of open and expansiveness of yoga and then that vigor of running, they really do go well together.
And I have to say, though, now that I am doing yoga and I'm running, I feel like I'm able to take some of the principles and practices that I'm learning in yoga and apply it to what I'm doing in running, and it makes me feel so much better.
As a teacher,
it changes everything.
Music to my ears.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Shanna, for joining us, and we hope that everyone listening has a summer full of both rest and healthy physical activity.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Brewing Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. If you are a UFT member, the Member Assistance Program can be reached at 212-701-9620 or by emailing mapinfo@uft.org. And once again, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.